Welcome, everyone. So glad that you've chosen to be with us here tonight. We are excited and I've been looking forward to the series all summer long, and Mark did a great job kicking us off last week, just sharing his faith story, and getting a chance for us to get to hear the hearts and the passions of our elders and hear more of their stories. Tonight, we're blessed to get to hear from Richard and Pam Evans. They've had a long history with this church and a lot of different connections. A lot of you know them. Some of you may not know much about their story. They have an incredible story. They're going to share some of that with us tonight. If they have a chance at the end, they'll open up for some questions, but we told them to take as much time as they needed to share their story because we want to hear from them, and then we're excited about that and what they have. Let me offer a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. Father, what an afternoon. Lord, thank you for the rain. We have needed so badly. And yet in the midst of that, experiencing some flooding and some dangerous roads, Father, we thank you for your protection. Pray that you would continue to be with those who are in harm's way and those first responders who are helping and serving our community so well. Father, thank you for a dry place to gather as your people here at Broadway. Father, thank you for Richard and Pam, for their hearts for you. We got most of all, thank you for your life in the midst of their life. And we're excited to get to hear from them, their story, their journey. Father, you have done so many amazing things, and they've got to see and witness and be a part of. God, you have used them to bless so many of us, and we are thankful for that. And so, God, we just ask for your grace and your peace tonight. As they share with us, God, would you speak to us through them? We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I'm Richard Evans, and I'm going to warn you right now that part of my testimony will be confessional, and that's just part of what I'm going to do. So, I guess the first one's kind of hard, but I just need to say it. I was born a Yankee. You know, I was quite young at the time when it happened. I really couldn't control where I was born. My parents were actually up in Connecticut as vocational missionaries, helping the church up there, and that's where I was born. I never found out for sure how this happened, but I think I started talking around 18 months, and that's when we came back home. So I think I was telling them, get me back to Texas. So really, Texas is all I've known. And basically, I've had an absolutely wonderful life, great childhood, grew up in a great Christian family. My mom and dad just did an excellent job of modeling what it means to be a Christian and how to live a Christian life. My teenage years were fun for me. I was very active in the youth group and thoroughly enjoyed that. I also was blessed to be in a wonderful Boy Scout troop that my dad and Stu Childry led. And we got to do all kinds of incredible things. We got to go camping and canoeing and backpacking and spelunking and all kinds of things. And so I had an absolutely wonderful childhood. I decided to go to ACU for college, and I was paying for college myself, so I'd saved up some money ahead of time. But I had a job, I worked 20 hours a week, but it was all on the weekend. And part of what that meant was that it was difficult for me to do a whole lot with my church there. Basically, I would be there on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, but other than that, there weren't a whole lot of things I could be involved in with the college group there. It really limited me. The other thing that kind of limited me, I had that time commitment that made it difficult, but I had a strange thing happen when I went to ACU and I went to church there. And that is, I walked into the church and I didn't know anybody, and they didn't know me. And I had never experienced that before. Now, I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I felt like Broadway was going to send a letter out to all the churches to let them know that Richard Evans is coming and be sure and look for him. But it was a strange experience. I grew up, everybody knew who I was. I knew my parents, I knew my family. We were close with the ministers all the time. When the missionaries were here on home leave, we'd have them in our homes and we'd have meals with them. And I just felt so connected to this church body. And so I went away to ACU. It was really kind of different, and it made it difficult for me to really connect the way I should. So the next part, after I was there for a couple years at ACU, I began what I call my prodigal son era. I had been at school for a while, but I really wasn't, I think, convinced that I knew what I wanted to do with my schooling, and I wasn't a great student, and I wasn't applying myself, and I basically got so far behind in some of my classes that I realized, you know what, even if I do great on my finals, I don't think I can pass this class. So I had at least 2 classes I didn't even go to the finals. And so ACU had a talk with me, and they said, why don't you not come back next semester? Which was a scary thing for me to hear, but it was absolutely what I needed to hear. I needed a wake-up call. I needed to be serious about what I was going to do. But I sure didn't want to come home, and I thought, I need to get this loan paid off because I've already have a debt there at ACU, and so I need to get that paid off. Well, I'd started working at a pet store there in Abilene, and I'd met a customer there that was from Ozona, and he works in the oil field. And I knew he had a lot of money, and I knew he made a lot of money because every payday he'd come up and buy something expensive from us at the pet store. So I called him and asked him, would it be possible to get a job there? He said, sure. So I decided to move to Ozona and work in the oil field so I could get a bunch of money and pay my debt off to ACU. Well, I did that. It wasn't the work itself wasn't that bad. Unfortunately, some of the people I was around, it was a difficult situation. My friend that I knew, he was a pretty good guy, but I was living with he and his brother in a mobile home, and then their father was actually the crew chief where I was. And I just started realizing pretty quickly that they were a rough bunch, and it really wasn't a great situation. I found out that the father was in the Army. He was on their boxing team, and he actually had a dishonorable discharge because of a fight that he was in where he hurt someone, and so I knew that situation wasn't good. I found out after I'd been there for a few months, they told me a story about their niece who was sick, and she'd been going to the doctor in Ozona 2 or 3 times. They kept saying, it's nothing serious, it's nothing serious. Well, all of a sudden it was very, very serious. They had to take her by ambulance to San Angelo. And this brother was telling me that while most of the family went to be with the niece, he stayed in Ozona because he was there with a loaded gun so that if his niece died, he could go kill the doctor. Well, I realized that wasn't a very good situation for me to be in. But what prodded me along the way was the fact that I found out through another coworker that said, yeah, the boss doesn't like you, and he's going to try to get rid of you as soon as he can hire somebody else. Well, that was really painful for me because I prided myself in being a good worker, but I was somewhat relieved as well. And so about a week later, the rig actually happened to be down. Everybody that I was living with and the boss left town to go do something, and I thought, you know what? He's trying to fire me in a while. I think I'm just going to leave. I just don't want to have to deal with this anymore. So I just packed up my stuff, wrote a note, and just headed back to Lubbock. Well, I've been working in the oil field for several months, and basically I was working 7 days a week, didn't have a day off. Sometimes I'd work a double shift. And so I was ready to relax a little bit. And so a friend of mine, I asked him if he'd like to go on a road trip. So I said, sure. So we went on a really epic road trip to California, had a great time. While we were in Yosemite, we were camping, and as we were visiting with some of the people camping there, they started sharing with me about planting trees. And so they were really excited about this. They said, yeah, we get a lot of college professors and a lot of really neat people, and we plant trees in the summertime, and you can make really good money. And I said, well, what kind of money? He said, well, $10 to $12 an hour. Well, back then, the minimum wage was $3 an hour, and so $10 to $12 an hour was a lot of money. So I kept that stored in the back of my mind. I got a couple of phone numbers, and when I got back to Lubbock, I told my parents about it, and I don't remember exactly how much later, but I think maybe just 2 or 3 days after I got back from my trip, I called one of these places in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon, and I asked if they needed some help, and they said, well, actually we do. We're putting a new crew together right now. They said, how quickly can you be there? And I said, well, when do I need to be there? And they said, well, you need to be here by Thursday at 5 p.m. Well, this phone call was happening on a Tuesday. And so I had to talk with my parents, and to this day, I'm still not sure why they let me do this, but they said, go ahead and go. So I headed out Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock, to go to Portland, Oregon, and drove a little past Salt Lake City, and around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I pulled off the side of the road, slept for 3 hours, got back in the car, drove to Portland, Oregon, got there by 4 o'clock. So I pulled into the place, talked to them, they said, great, you're on the crew. Be here at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll head out for our first job. I said, where is the first job? Oh, it's Idaho. I said, I just drove through Idaho yesterday. Sorry, we're going to Idaho. So we went to Idaho, and we started planting trees. And I tell you what, I've done yard work. I've done some hard work before, but this was absolutely the most painful work I'd ever done in my life. You're constantly bending over, planting these little trees. And it killed my back. It was just so painful. And you got paid by the tree, not by the hour. And so I was only doing well enough to make basically about minimum wage. And so I tried this for a few weeks, and I don't know what tree planting group these other people had run into, but it was not the group that I was in. We had no college professors there. We had people who liked to drink and cuss, and we had a few people that liked to take drugs. And that was the group of people I was hanging around. So we actually had a situation. We had 30 people in our crew, and we got in a lot of trouble because people would come behind us and check out and make sure our work was the way it was supposed to be. We're contracted by the U.S. Forest Service, and so they had people who would come and check. Well, we didn't pass the grade, and so they actually had to fire several people. Somehow, out of 30 people, I think they cut it down to 8. I was one of the 8 that they let stay, which was amazing because I'd never done this before, and some of these people had done this for a couple of years. So I was happy about that, but I still tried, and I told them how difficult this was, and they said, well, I think you can get better. I tried for another week or two, and it just wasn't getting any better, and I thought, if I'm making minimum wage, there's a lot of other things I could do, except I didn't want to come home. So I was in Idaho, and I thought, I have a friend in Portland, Oregon, and he works at a pet store, and I think that'd be a fun thing to do. So I drove back to Portland, Oregon, and it wasn't until I got there that I called my parents to tell them my situation. I want to let them know that I wasn't tree planting anymore. And they said, why don't you just come home? And I said, I can't. I'm too embarrassed. I've quit 2 jobs in just a few months. My friends are coming close to graduating from college. Keep in mind that in my graduating class was Mark Lanier, who's one of the most successful lawyers now ever. And it's like, I just can't do this. I've got to stay away for a little bit longer. If I come home now, everybody's going to know that my tree planting career was a bust, and I'll be a failure. Finally, I think my dad finally was appealed to my logical side, and he said, you're going to be making minimum wage. You're going to have to pay to stay somewhere. You're not going to be able to save any money. Come home, live with us. You can mow yards, make some good money, and save up your money and go back to college. And on top of that, my mom also pleaded to me on an emotional level and said that, I can't remember the exact time, but I think Mother's Day was in 3 days. And she said that really would be about the best Mother's Day present I could ever receive. And so I did that, and I got back in time for Mother's Day. And then there's so much to this story, I don't have time to go through all of it, and I don't want to minimize any of this, but I came back and I went to college again. I got plugged in with CA. I met Pam. We got married. She's going to talk about some of that. But at this point, I want to talk about sort of my spiritual journey. I need to let you know a little bit of my background to kind of know where I'm coming from. But obviously, I grew up here at Broadway, grew up in the church, always doing stuff at church, very active in the youth group. And after Pam and I were married, we were in the couples class and newlyweds class, and we were involved in all kinds of things. And I'm sure in some ways I had some spiritual maturity. Oh, I forgot to mention I was baptized when I was 9. And I'm sure I had some spiritual maturity, but it just really wasn't where it should be. It really wasn't. And it took me a while to realize that I had a secret sin that was actually causing me to not mature the way I needed to. You know, Satan is perfectly fine with you being active at church. He doesn't care if you go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, if you're in a growth group, if you're in a Bible study, as long as he can keep a part of you. Because as long as he has a part of you, he has you. And it took me a while to realize what was going on, but I finally was able to own up to it. And the problem is that ever since I've been a teenager, I've struggled with pornography. And it happened when I was a kid, taking out the trash. I'd come across a magazine. I'd be out in the vacant lot. I'd find a magazine. I wasn't trying to find it at first. It sort of found me, but it was one of those things that over the years, it would grip me again and again. And, you know, I've had to confess to Pam, you know, several times during our marriage that I was struggling with pornography. And every time I've done that, two things have always amazed me. One of them is what a forgiving wife I have and what a loving wife I have. But the other thing is how incredibly painful this is for her. You know, the world will try to tell you, kind of wink at pornography. It's kind of like, oh, that's what guys will do, and just act like it's no big deal. But it is. It's a huge deal. I know marriages that have fallen apart completely because of that. And thankfully, mine hasn't. Skip ahead a little while. A little bit less than 15 years ago, there was a men's retreat, and I was on the planning committee, and they were talking about doing some various things. And one of the things they talked about were some testimonies. And I shared with the guys, you know, my struggle with pornography. And, you know, they talked about several things during that. I wasn't on the main committee. I was just on part of the group. And they didn't really say much about it. And I thought, well, they probably don't want to hear that. And so they didn't say anything to me about it for several weeks. And then about 2 weeks before the retreat, they said, oh, yeah, Richard, yeah, we want you to do your talk. Oh, okay. So, of course, now reality's setting in, and I realize, you know, all the people on staff that I love and admire, the elders that I respect and love are going to be there. My dad, who's an elder, is going to be there. Both of my brother-in-laws are going to be there. And I'm sitting there thinking, I can't surprise my family like this. I can't spring this on them. And so I realized I needed to go talk to them. So I went and talked to my parents and both of my sisters and their husbands. They were incredibly gracious. The grace and love that they showed to me was a huge part of beginning some of the healing that I needed. I did my testimony at the men's retreat. It was very well received, and I've had a lot of people that talked to me afterwards and felt like it was a helpful thing, and I was glad I did that. One of the things that happened that truly amazed me is 2 years later on the same retreat, same place, Broadway was about ready to select elders, and people were beginning to submit names. And I had a few of the elders come to me and say, I know that your name's going to come up to be an elder, and I really want you to consider being an elder. And I was amazed that these men who had heard me 2 years earlier would ask me to do that. And it really had a big impact on me. James 5:16 says, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other that you will be healed. You know, every time we have a sin and we confess it and ask for forgiveness from God, He gives it to us immediately. But I think what this verse is talking about is that sometimes there's some healing that does not happen until you confess. It does not happen until you have people pray for you. And obviously you have to use wisdom. You know, there are many of you that I've known for decades that probably have no idea that I struggle with this. This isn't something I go and talk about all the time. I've talked to several groups of men before, but this is the first time that I've talked to men and women both. But I felt like it was an important thing. I remember probably 2 or 3 years after I gave my talk on that men's retreat, and Rob Corey coming up to me and saying, "I'm still praying for you. I pray for you every day." And I know that sometimes that we need the prayers of other people to help us in our healing process and to help us move on. And I feel that. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about this tonight is because if you or your spouse, or you have a child or a grandchild that's going through this is a serious thing. And Satan will use anything he can to keep hold of you. And this is one that's very secret, and because of that, it's easy for Satan to really have a hold on you. And so part of what I want to do is to let you know that I would be happy to talk to anybody that is struggling with that. I just have a few observations I want to talk about, and then I'll let Pam share tonight. One of the things that I think that I've come through with all this is, I look at my life, and I grew up in a great church, great Christian family, went to Christian universities, had all these advantages, and yet I still have a lot of mess-ups. And I really feel like I was almost into my 40s before I had much spiritual maturity. I look around sometimes and I see some 20 and 30-year-olds that just blow my mind, and I'm thinking, man, I wasn't anywhere close to that at that age. And one of the things that makes me realize is God has different plans for us, and it helps me, tries to keep me incredibly tolerant of people who sometimes I think they need to be a little bit more mature, because I realize, man, all the advantages I had, and it took me a long time to sort of figure some things out, and I'm still figuring things out. So that's one of the things that I've realized. The other thing is, I work with a lot of needy people. Carpenter's Church, Family Promise. I've got other people that are very needy in my life. And, I actually think that God uses that to ground me. I'm an incredibly selfish person. I really struggle with that. And I think God has put people in my life to draw me out of myself and to invest myself into other people's lives, because I need that. And so sometimes it gets almost a little overwhelming, some of the needs that are out there. But yet, I really consider that God's reminder of, I'm helping you. Because I do have such a tendency to be selfish and want to do what I want to do. I also just want to share with you a few things in my life that, I look back at some things in my life, and I can see God's working now that I couldn't see at the time. Obviously, when I look at how much money I spent at ACU, and I never got a degree from there, I'm thinking, my goodness, what could I have done with that time? What could I have done with that money? And sure, there may have been some things I could have done. However, the last few months I was there, I ended up working at a pet store that was a really good, well-run pet store, and I absolutely loved working there. It's the first job I ever had that I thought, wow, I think I might want to do this. I think this would be a fun thing to do. And so God blessed me with that. I grew up here in Lubbock, and I went to the pet stores all the time, but they were nasty, and for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I never ever thought about a pet store as a place to even work, much less a career. I thought about working at a zoo, I thought about being a forest ranger and things like that, but I really never thought about a pet store, and God gave me that desire while I was there at ACU. And obviously, when ACU said, why don't you just leave for a while, that was a blessing too, because That allowed me to come back here to Lubbock. Don't have time to go into all this, but man, I had some great spiritually formative times at CA. That was a really wonderful thing. Charles Mickey was there, had an incredible ministry there, and it was a very special time in my life. I was fortunate to be in Mountaintop for 3 years, and that was an incredible experience. I'd never been with a small group of people like that, where we traveled quite a bit and prayed together and lived life together, and so that was an incredible blessing. And obviously, this woman sitting over here to my right, I would have not met her if I had stayed at ECU probably and continued on. So it's easy to look and see how God used some things in my life to bless me when I didn't realize it. And I guess one of the last things I'll share is I had a chance. Of course, I went to ACU, came back. My grades were so bad that I couldn't get into Tech, so I had to go to LCU for a while to get my grades up and then go to Tech. And I was at Tech, and I finally had come up with the idea, well, yes, I do want to have a pet store. I'm going to get a business degree, and that'll help me. And finally, even knowing that and having some classes that were a little bit helpful for me, I still didn't like school that much. And I finally thought, I don't really have to have a degree to do this, so I think I'll just try it on my own. And if it doesn't work, I'll go back to school and do something else. Well, I'd saved a little bit of money, but I probably had less than $5,000. My parents were not in any position to loan me money. My plan was to get a loan from the small business SBA loan. And an interesting thing happened. Charles Mickey was actually out of the state, and he happened to run into somebody who used to go here at Broadway. And he was talking about the campus ministry, and somehow it got brought up that I was going to try to open up a pet store. Well, this gentleman actually has business interests several states, and he happened to be back in Lubbock a while later. Actually, it was about 2 weeks before I was going to go try to get my loan. And he called me and he said, I was talking to Charles Mickey, he said, you're going to open up a pet store? And I said, yes. And he said, well, why don't you come by? I want to visit with you about that. So I said, okay. So I went there and was talking to him, and he said, well, how are you going to start your business? I said, well, I'm going to get a loan from the SBA. He said, well, I hate to tell you this, but you are the wrong sex and you're the wrong color. They had a lot of problems back then, and they were really trying to make things a little bit more politically correct, so white males were not the people they were trying to loan money to at the time. But he said, I'll tell you what, I'll help you out. So he proceeded to tell me that he would give me X amount of money, and how I could pay him back when I could. And basically, he just said that my stipulation is that you can only share this information with your parents and Pam, and nobody else can ever know that I did this. And so it was because of that I was able to start the pet store. There's absolutely, I don't know if there's any other way I could have done it, and God just landed that right in my lap. So I try to think of that as I realize other people's situations, and sometimes it takes someone from the outside that they can do some help that they weren't even expecting. So I'll let Pam go now.
Okay, now that he's got my nose dripping and my eyes running, I'll take over. First of all, just a little bit about my background. I grew up basically in Levelland. I was born in New Mexico, and my mom and dad were wonderful Christian parents, and he worked for Halliburton Oil with the aspiration of getting enough money to farm. And you know how lucrative that is. He finally got enough money to start farming, and so all of my school years were in Levelland. And I moved to Lubbock to go to Tech, and there's this guy in my economics class that was really struggling and needing a lot of help. and he walked by me every day and never said a word. And so one day I said, "Don't you go to Broadway?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, yes." So that's how I got Richard's attention, is he needed help with his economics. And the rest is history there. But we really didn't know each other until we had that class at Tech. The time that I grew up in Levelland, it was on the farm, and I got to hoe cotton in the summer and all that good stuff. When I was thinking about my spiritual growth, that was the first thing that came to mind, is my wonderful Christian family, and also my spiritual family. And, my dad was a deacon and then an elder at the church, and my brother's an elder now, and I have a wonderful Christian sister and brother-in-law. They all are just a rock in my life, and I thank God for them. But also, something that happened growing up that really shaped me spiritually was the brokenness that the devil put in this world. My mom and dad both were such wonderful leaders. They taught me to lean on God with everything, to turn to Jesus in every situation. But our family had a secret, and that was my mother was bipolar, or manic depressive, whatever you want to call it. And she did not want people to know. She could not face the shame that came with that. And of course, back in the 70s and 80s, when I was living at home, any kind of mental illness or handicap was a great shame. And so our family just sucked it up and dealt with it, and it was not dealt with in a healthy way. And so that's one of the things I think that drew me to Richard, is his open heart and his willingness to be vulnerable. And God, works on you for a time, and then finally okay, it's time for me to share this. And that was just such a wonderful, freeing experience. And even though some of the things that Richard and I have dealt with have been very difficult, just the comfort and the healing that comes with that confession and the sharing of struggles is amazing. And there are, a few people who have issues along the way, but overall it has been just such a blessing to learn with Richard how to share and to grow through trials and not keep them locked up in a box until they are just tearing you apart. So, like I said, my family gave me the spiritual foundation in life, and I'm just so forever grateful. My mom died suddenly when she was just 58, and it was at that time that I realized the damage that caused, because I think as long as she was living, I had that hope of a normal relationship with her. But once she died, everything just started falling apart for me. And I had a 6-month-old and a 3.5-year-old that did not sleep much. And so I was just like fraying. And again, people that I could share that with, it really helped. But because of respect for my mom and dad, I did not share that till my dad passed away, except for close friends. But I just encourage you to share and get the comfort that God offers. And even if you can't share it with a large group, you've got to have someone that you can share your burden with. And the next thing that I think really formed me spiritually, and our marriage has over and over, but just big things besides just that slow, constant growth that Richard has given me is God had called me to be a caretaker. And I said, no, thank you. And he said, no, really. Because my sister and I had grown up having to do all the housework and laundry and everything for my mom. And just to let you know, besides her being bipolar, she had a lot of health issues. And I mean, from the beginning, that my brother's 7 years older than I am, because she had 4 miscarriages between us. And then she wasn't supposed to be able to have another baby, and my sister came a year and a half later, and they both almost died. So she had severe RA, severe gastro problems, and was almost, she was on crutches and a wheelchair some, but the arthritis spurs had gone into her spinal column, and they were putting pressure on her spine. And they had told us that there wasn't anything they could do until she was bedridden, because the surgery for that is very risky, and they didn't recommend it except for a very last resort. And so we just grew up fast, having to be responsible. And that was my goal in life, is to be responsible. And so God decided to put me with a man that chased trees and and snakes and all this good stuff. And there's more to that I'll say later on, how we balance each other out. But so growing up with this, I thought, okay, you know, mom's gone, I'm trying to get myself back together, things can be okay. And then my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And he had never been in the hospital, didn't have a thing wrong with him. This was difficult because he needed to go, but his body was so healthy. And even at the end, hospice told us he can't last another night. And it was 5 more nights. He just was such a healthy man in every other way. So needless to say, that was very difficult. And my sister lived 3.5 hours away from him. And my brother was taking care of Dad's farm and trying to do the business stuff. And guys are just not the greatest caretakers, in case you don't know. It can be learned, and he helped a lot. But it was obvious that I needed to be in Levelland a lot. So God gave me a job where I could sort of go back and forth. I was trying to be a stay-at-home mom and just work on Tuesday, Thursdays when the girls had sunshine school, and then when they were in school, I was given several opportunities to just do books. I'd studied accounting and marketing, and so God just gave me people that said, hey, will you come do this in my office in my home, without even looking for anything. So it was obvious, okay, God's tapped me on the shoulder. He worked out all the details. So I did that, and the weekend that Dad died, my aunt and uncle that lived in Fort Worth decided to move to Lubbock for me to help take care of them. And they didn't have any kids. So this was my mom's sister and her husband. And many of you met Aunt Evelyn and Uncle Homer, and they were such a joy. I mean, they were these little people that you just wanted to hug and pinch their cheeks. They were just like a little mini Ken and Barbie or something. And I see Michelle Thomas nodding. Even her sweet daughter Heather came and interviewed Uncle Homer because he was in the Battle of the Bulge, and she had a great curiosity about history, and he loved to be around young people. He never knew the word can't. Even at the end with his neuropathy and Parkinson's, if you ask Uncle Homer if he wanted to do something, he would say yes, even if it was just totally ridiculous. He ended up in the floor of more public events than I can remember because he would not stay at home. And one was here at Broadway. They wanted to see the kids' musical, and it was downstairs that year, and the elevator broke. Do y'all remember that year? And everybody had to go down the stairs. And so we got him down there. But just after about a year and a half, my aunt had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And that was a quick but painful, horrible thing to experience. And when she was gone, he was just so lost. And so he became my sidekick every day, everywhere. He was with me a lot. And he passed away from complications with his Parkinson's disease, but not before he blessed us so much. And of course, in the meantime, Richard was helping his family a lot with his grandmothers, who both now have passed away. So during that time, my spiritual growth, just being able to sit and visit with these mentors, these spiritual giants of my family, it was just such a blessing. I know the last Christmas that we had Daddy, we brought him to the house, and we decided because of Dad, we would have a family Christmas service instead of trying to go to church. And he knew every word of several of the hymns, and he hadn't been able to say a sentence in months, and he was there singing those songs, and he talked about his parents. And I guess it was just the holiday. That was just such a blessing to be able to experience that. And so through all of that, I think I grew a lot in what was important and what was not. And one day, Richard came home, and the girls were still little, and I just said, "My life is not my own." And he said, "Where have I heard that before?" And then it's like God really, during that season of my life, made me realize, no, your life is not your own. You've given it to me, and this is what I've put in front of you. And it was just a blessing. And I could tell when my attitude changed, and I would ask people to pray for my attitude, because frankly, sometimes I'd get so mad because people would see this little cute aunt and uncle that were just this tall, and they would just go on and on about how cute they were and how much fun they were. And I would just be thinking, oh, if they could only take their medicine and not get their medicine box mixed up, or, if they could stay seated and quit falling down, and if I have to go to the emergency room one more time. And it was just, I had this guilt of like, these people are dear, and I'm having this horrible attitude, and of course I was exaggerating, but it's like, I miss all my kids' activities, I don't get to go to their ball games, and I had this pity party going on, and then I realized God just started opening my eyes to, your life is not your own. And as soon as I started praying that I would serve out of love and for Him instead of my little checklist of have-tos, it was much, much better. The other thing that helped me also was my mom's side of the family had a lot of Southern Baptist and Methodist in the family. And so we grew up in a very open, discussion-filled family. I never grew up feeling, okay, there's only one person that's right. And of course, through discussions, I'll never forget when my mom's, who was a good old Southern Baptist lady, my granddad Gillespie was a deacon at the church in O'Donnell, and so was his brother. But my grandmother, when she was older, she looked at me and she said, "Do you think I'm going to hell because I'm Baptist?" And it just broke my heart. So we have had a lot of discussions about Christianity, just the broad church, not just the Church of Christ. And it has helped me become so much more compassionate and I'm not going to say not tolerant in the bad way. Tolerant has almost become a bad word in these days. But it really, I see where people are coming from. And I think, I see their heart and I see where I need to study, where they have helped me grow in different areas. And so I'm very grateful for that. My mom was a piano teacher and she taught a lot of the small churches, ministers' wives, piano. And of course, in the 70s, that caused quite a ruckus. My mom was perpetuating instrumental music, so it was all, we had some issues with that. And through it all, basically, people saw that my mom loved the Lord. And even with all of her problems, she was the one that took us to the nursing home. She got her once a week due every Friday at the beauty shop. And we went straight from the beauty shop to the nursing home. And we did the whole circle, both sides. When we got older, we sort of got impatient with that. But Mother would say, "No, Friday afternoons, you have to go to the nursing home with me." So there was a lot of good things that came out of that. But when I married Richard, we had Emily, who's back here, telling us she was our judge tonight. How are we doing?
So far, so good.
Okay. She's 22 and she's a senior at LCU. And then Elise is 26 and she is working for an organization called Teen Challenge in Utah. And she's a social worker and it's an in-house program there. So the girls have blessed us and have given us a lot of joys and a lot of growth through the good times and getting Richard and I to parent on the same level through the years. Some people are laughing. So that is the next thing that caused us much Christian growth is just the awe and responsibility of being a parent. And even, with good kids in this world, just being able to let go and let them go do what God wants them to do. I just think about all these parents who have sent their kids overseas, and that kind of faith amazes me. But Utah's not overseas, but it seems like it. And it just amazes me at that faith that is there to let your kids go and let them live their own life for God. The last thing that I wanted to say is that overall, I think that between my personality being a little bit OCD, not great over there, but just like right here, right? Okay. And Richard being not OCD. We have balanced each other out very well. With my situation at home, I became very fearful, I think. I was just wanting peace. I was the middle child, so I was the peacemaker, and I was the oldest of girls, so I always had to take care of that little sister of mine, and I was just back to that responsible Pam. And, I wasn't unhappy. I had a good life, but I was always responsible and just having to have all my ducks in a row. I mean, I didn't dream about that I'm always organizing or doing something in my dreams. And I know it's sad. But Richard has given me that balance because he really was quite the opposite. And I have given him the balance of being, more settled down and responsible. And this store has been just such a blessing. We were 23. Richard was 23 and I was 22 when he opened the pet store. And we know that is just an act of the Lord. What 22 and 23-year-old is mature enough, has any discernment? I mean, we were so naive, and that S word we tell our kids what to say. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, and God has blessed it in a way that we can bless others and have some freedom of our time, also to give and leave the store. I know yesterday Richard wasn't at the pet store hardly any, and then the cash registers went down and Aaron had to come help this morning trying to get our point of purchase system back up, and responsible Richard here just comes home and goes, "Oh, we'll work on it in the morning." He goes to sleep. And I don't know how he can do that, but God has blessed him with that. So, when things go awry in our life, well, Richard only catches on to about a fourth of it. And I take care of the rest because, I'm the responsible one. But until I met Richard, I had not really wanted to travel. And he just loves to travel. And so, it's neat how you grow spiritually, seeing different cultures and different people and different needs. And he has physically made me let go of some fears or overcome some fears by taking me caving and whitewater rafting down a 100-foot waterfall. Yeah, I did that. I drew the line at bungee jumping. He went, I didn't. That part of me, it's funny how that God had that plan too, because I've noticed that I'm really able to just let down and enjoy myself now, instead of being the one, since my mom was ill and then passed away, I was the matriarch of our family at a very early age. And to this day, my brother and sister are still, I don't know if we would ever have Christmas if I didn't say, okay, we've got to have a date and a time, and they just go along their merry way. I need to make that fun sometime and just not do that. Yeah. But Richard has really blessed me in all the ways that he is vulnerable and very encouraging to people. After he gave his talk at that men's retreat, I was not afraid of his confession, but I was afraid that people would think less of him, because I knew his heart, and I knew truly that he wanted to do this to help others. And in the weeks that came, there were so many notes and letters, and of course they were for him, and so I don't know what they said, but it was very obvious that he was helping a lot of people. And then through the people that I've been able to share with, and a lot of these people have been at Carpenters, people who have grown up with parents who could not be their best all the time, or maybe they left them and abandoned them as babies. Through my experience with my family, I understand a little inkling of mental illness, and I'm just so grateful that God gave me to a bipolar mom who was a Christian with such a strong Christian father, or I would be across the street, floundering, trying to find my way. So there's just so many things that I am very grateful for that have been here because of the brokenness of the world. God didn't send them. It's just a thing that Satan has brought into the world between illness and just plain evil and sin. And I'm very grateful that we can live our lives to be a testimony to say that that's not the end of the story, that you can use it to God's glory. He can change you. And it's not just back when, Saul persecuted Christians and even to the death, or when David had an affair with Bathsheba. That happens today in all our lives. And I'm just so grateful to be part of the Evans clan. And even though my parents are gone, I have another set, a mom and dad, that I love so dearly. And I love all of you at Broadway. And some of you were the ones that taught me through those hard times when I was struggling and I couldn't pray because I was so emotionally fragile with my mom, or mad at Richard, whatever it is. But I just want to thank you for being my brothers and sisters.
Well, let me be the first to say thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, for being open and vulnerable and honest with us. I know we've been blessed by it. Can we thank Richard and Pam?